Today I'm reviewing a 35 square meter or 375 square foot newly renovated apartment in Katowice, Poland. It's a really unique design with a ton of bold colors and materials, but they've also made a few mistakes that I'm going to share with you. I'm here to maximize your home's resale value through good design, link in the description, but for now, let's take a look inside this apartment. Alright, let's start by talking about the kitchen and dining space, because for such a small apartment, there really is a lot to see in here. Because it's a studio apartment and all the interior partitions were removed, with the exception of the bathroom, so it feels really open in here. Now, in the kitchen and dining area, which is right next to the entryway, they're using a cream terrazzo floor, and that makes total sense in here. It's ideal for coming in from the outdoors and taking off your wet, dirty shoes, and it also makes sense in the kitchen because it's super durable and easy to clean. Now, when you walk in the front door, on your left side is the glass block wall that's enclosing the bathroom, which I'll get to in a minute, and then over here on the right side, after you enter the kitchen, is an exposed concrete wall. Of course, this isn't here because it's unfinished. It's here because concrete played such a major role in the history of architecture in this part of the world. And specifically, 1970s apartment blocks in Katowice like this one were built from prefabricated concrete slabs, which is a hallmark of communist-era modernist architecture. And so, instead of adding some fake industrial coating, just showing the raw bones of the building is a really honest move. But at the same time, the curved glass block wall on the other side softens the room with more of a feminine energy. So you've got this polarity of masculine and feminine as soon as you enter the apartment, and that's really attractive to anyone who enters here. Now, they've got this round dining table with a tapered blue geometric base that really anchors the room and gives the area some visual weight. But then the vintage bentwood chairs in this warm walnut and leather seats bring in a mid-century element that, again, softens out the rough concrete backdrop. So you can see how they're playing with materials in this apartment to create a really rich environment. But let's talk more about the kitchen, because the kitchen is really more of a kitchenette, and that's something I want to dig into. The counters along the wall have these stainless steel cabinets with a decent amount of storage underneath, but the rest of the kitchen is tucked into this little nook here where they've got the sink, a bit more storage beneath the sink, and I can only assume this is the refrigerator to the left of the sink here. Now, this setup definitely makes the kitchen compact, but it's too compact. And there's no reason for them to have such a small kitchen in here other than to not let the kitchen sprawl into the rest of the space. But by paying so much attention to how the kitchen would impact the rest of the apartment, they've ended up creating a significantly less functional kitchen than they could have, even in this tiny apartment. For example, the kitchen counters here are not very deep. You can see this flower arrangement is set pretty close to the wall, yet it's hanging a little bit over the front of the counter, which shows just how shallow these counters really are. So if they were to extend them out, something like 3 to 6 inches, that would make a big difference. But more importantly, the countertop isn't wide enough either. The left side has the flowers, and on the right is the stovetop, but even if you assume that these flowers wouldn't normally be here, they can only use the left 2/3 of this countertop for meal prep, and there's no other place for them to work. And that's before bringing any sort of appliances in here. So if they want to put a toaster, or a blender, or a coffee machine, or an air fryer on here, it's going to take up a significant amount of this counter space, which leaves them with almost no room for meal prep. So I would have really liked to see them extend this kitchen countertop unit out by at least 1 and potentially 2 more cabinets to give them 50 to 100% more usable space. Now, obviously that's going to leak into what's currently the living room, but if they want to have a functioning kitchen, then that's definitely something they should do. And what should they do with this extra countertop space? Well, I would put the sink here, and because that would free up this entire zone over here where the sink currently is, you could put in a larger fridge, because the current fridge is super small, and then fill out the rest of this nook with built-in storage. They can use the same beautiful wooden fronts that they're using now, but instead of wedging a standalone cabinet into this cavity, a built-in unit would give them so much more room to store food and dishware. And so just by making those 2 small changes of adding 1 to 2 additional cabinets and installing a built-in unit, you just gained an enormous amount of kitchen space to make this place so much more functional. And if you want to go to the next level, you could put a kitchen island here where they've got the dining table, or they could just raise up the dining table a little bit so that it's the same height as the counter, so you can use the dining table for food prep as well. Either of those can work. I do like the modularity of having a movable dining table here, but don't underestimate the power of having an island and stools. They've only got 2 seats here anyway, and they can have a dining table in front of the sofa, or a folding table elsewhere in the apartment if they really want to have more of a proper dining setup. But just getting a little more creative here with the layout would make this kitchen so much more functional. But now let's take a look at the living room, which is right next to the kitchen and maintains this exposed concrete wall. They've got this small love seat here and a TV mounted in this little nook in the wall that matches the nook where the sink and fridge are right now. And with this sideboard beneath it, everything looks really sleek and polished. Now, the coffee table here is pretty small, but it makes sense given the size of the space, and they've got these coral floor-to-ceiling curtains that are covering up both the window and also the door to their small terrace. Now, this apartment is on the 11th floor, so they get a lot of daylight coming in, but one thing they're really missing in here is some plant life. If they were to put something like a rubber plant or a corn plant in this corner, it would really give the room a breath of fresh air. But instead, this corner looks a little bare, which is pretty hard to pull off in a space this small, but somehow they've managed. And in that same vein, another thing they could do here is get rid of this piece of art on the wall and put a big shelving unit there. I actually just finished making another video about another apartment in Poland that has some beautiful shelving in its study, and something like that would work really well here. Because in a space this small, and keep in mind, this apartment is only 35 square meters, you really need every bit of storage you can get. So I definitely would have added some additional storage here to give them some breathing room. But now let's look at the bedroom. And again, because we're in a studio space, the bedroom is really just behind the living room here, with the sofa tucked up against the bed. And I'd say there are two things that stand out here. One is the vintage wardrobe on the left here with these beautiful brass legs that lift it up off the floor and make it look like it's floating. And then the second eye catcher is this red velvet headboard. If it were me, I would have done the headboard in the same color as the kitchen nook, which is this really deep, rich blue, instead of introducing this new red color into the space, because it doesn't match with anything else and kind of clashes with the orange curtains that run around the bathroom. Because right now, we're just introducing way too many colors in here, with the light blue wall, the darker blue couch, the orange curtain on the bathroom, the red headboard, the coral curtains, and the burgundy wall. There's way too much going on in here color-wise, and we really need to rein that in. But I do appreciate that they've included the headboard for one particular reason, which is that it's going to act as a sound barrier. And this is something they've been doing in Europe for decades, especially in post-war apartments and hotels where they have concrete walls, because the concrete walls are cold and echoey, so interior designers would pad the entire wall to warm it up and also to dampen the sound. And given that the TV is right here, and the bathroom, living room, dining room, and kitchen are also all right here, anything to dampen the sound for someone who might still be lying in bed while another person is already up is a smart move. And of course, you can say it would be better to have an enclosed bedroom so that noise is less of an issue, but the reality is, in a 35 square meter apartment, you have to make some sacrifices like these if you want to have an open concept space. And I think they've done that exactly right here. Okay, now it's time to talk about the bathroom, which is right in the center of this apartment with everything else revolving around it. And the curved glass block wall of the bathroom is really the signature architectural statement of the apartment, and it looks impressive both from the inside and from the outside. And because they've used a curved wall here instead of a straight one, it eliminates any sharp corners and just makes the room feel fluid and easy to move through. Now, the entry to the bathroom is through this bright blue stained plywood door, and inside there's a slightly darker terrazzo on the floor and walls than what we have outside in the kitchen, which gives the bathroom its own distinct mood, but it's still connected to the rest of the flat. There's this mint colored vanity that's holding this beautiful vessel sink, which I can't figure out for the life of me why it's off axis here, and part of me likes it and part of me hates it. And then they've got a really interesting element with this mirror here, which runs all the way up to the ceiling and actually onto the ceiling to make the bathroom feel even taller. Now, the shower is actually pretty spacious given the size of the apartment, and the toilet sits right next to the wall here, which is only a couple of feet from the bed. But because of how much privacy the glass blocks offer, it's totally fine to have the toilet in a spot like that, and it still gets tons of natural light. But they've also installed the orange curtain on the outside of the bathroom, so you can close it if you want even more privacy. Now, you could argue that it would make more sense to have the curtain on the inside of the bathroom, but realistically, in a space like this, it's not going to matter, and having it on the outside means that it won't get damp if someone's taking a hot shower. Overall, this is a really well executed bathroom. But what can we learn from this apartment? Well, the big lesson here for me is how to use materials to replace walls. Think about it. Instead of putting a wall between the kitchen and dining room and the living room, they changed the material on the floors from terrazzo to hardwood to signify that that shift was happening, which allowed those two rooms to stay open. And instead of putting a wall around the bedroom, they installed a textured headboard to muffle the sounds bouncing off the concrete walls and make that corner of the flat just a little bit quieter. And even for the bathroom, instead of installing traditional walls, they used a curved glass block wall to carve out a space for the bathroom without gutting the entire apartment and turning it into a dysfunctional box. So in your own home, and especially if you have a small space, think about how you can use materials instead of walls to achieve the same ends. You will have to get creative, but I promise you, you can push this way further than you think. But the second big lesson here is that with enough creativity, you can create a spectacular space even in a really small footprint. I would say this is a very comfortable flat for one person and potentially two. Storage will become an issue if there are two people living here, so they'd want to find some solutions for that, but they managed to pack in a bedroom, a living room, a kitchen, a dining room, and a bathroom all in a 35 square meter footprint, which is pretty impressive. And if they make the couple of changes I recommended, like extending the kitchen counters, installing built-in storage in the kitchen, and adding some additional shelving next to the TV, they'd have significantly more usable space and make this place even more functional. So I'm breaking down a ton of apartments like this one, so make sure you subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. If you want to learn how to evaluate properties like this for yourself, so you can maximize your resale value on any home you buy or redesign, check the link in the description. And if you want to see another beautiful apartment that really nails it with the finishes, check out this video up here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the comments.